The morning light slipped gently through the curtains, casting soft patterns across the floor of Trina's apartment. Her dress hung by the window, a pale rose satin, elegant and understated. It matched the bridesmaid's palette perfectly, although she wasn't technically a bridesmaid anymore. She still hadn't decided if she was going to wear it. Her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. She'd been staring into her coffee, the silence of the apartment a contrast to the buzz of nerves in her stomach. It was Kayla's wedding day. After months of chaos, exclusion, and unanswered questions, today was the day everything was supposed to come together, or unravel completely. The message was from Kayla. Tell her the truth, or I will. I'm about to share something personal, but first drop your city or country in the comments. Let's see how many hearts this story can touch. Trina stared at the screen. Her fingers tightened around the mug, the heat seeping through her skin as her heartbeat began to accelerate. The truth. What truth? And who was her? She read it again, as if the meaning might change. It didn't. A single sharp line of text, but it landed like a hammer blow. The quiet morning shattered. She texted back immediately, "Kayla, what are you talking about? What truth?" No response. 3 dots blinked, then vanished. Nothing. The room seemed colder now. Trina set her coffee down, untouched, and walked to the window. Outside, the world looked normal. Sun-dappled cars, a jogger with earbuds, a couple laughing over bagels on the cafe patio across the street. But inside her chest, a familiar ache was rising, that heavy, bracing sensation she'd come to associate with her family. She had been trying so hard to stay out of it, to not push, to not demand. Ever since her mother had cut her out of the wedding plans, Trina had told herself she wouldn't be dragged back into the chaos. But this wasn't just cold shoulders and canceled appointments anymore. Kayla's message had weight. It was deliberate, urgent. She reached for her phone again, dialing, voicemail. Then again. Still nothing. The questions swirled like a storm cloud just beyond reach. Was it about the fake messages she'd started suspecting months ago? Something with the honeymoon plans? Or had their mother finally gone too far, said too much, done something that Kayla couldn't forgive? Trina didn't know, but she did know one thing. She couldn't ignore the text. Not today, not now. She picked up the rose satin dress and laid it across the bed, smoothing the fabric gently. It wasn't the role she imagined playing on Kayla's wedding day, but she would show up anyway. And if the truth was coming, she'd be ready to hear it, or tell it. 6 months earlier, Trina had nearly dropped her phone when she saw Kayla's name light up the screen. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and she was walking back from a client meeting, the air crisp with early autumn. She answered with a smile already forming. "Hey, you. What's up?" Kayla's voice came through in breathless shrieks. "He did it! Trina, he proposed!" In the middle of the sidewalk, Trina froze. "Wait, what? Are you serious?" "I'm so serious. There was a rooftop and fairy lights and this cheesy jazz music, and he got down on one knee and, Trina, I couldn't even breathe. I said yes." Trina laughed, her chest swelling with joy. "Of course you did. Oh my God, Kayla." "I need you," Kayla said, her voice trembling with excitement. "I want you to be my maid of honor. I can't do this without you." The words landed like a spark in Trina's heart. She sank onto a bench, her planner slipping from her bag to the ground. "You have me, always." They spent that evening on the phone, dreaming aloud. Venues, colors, dresses, signature cocktails. Trina took notes without being asked, already building spreadsheets in her mind. That's who she was, the organizer, the steady one. And truthfully, she loved it. Kayla, with her creativity and impulsiveness, was the dreamer. Together, they made a perfect pair. Trina's evenings quickly became filled with Pinterest boards and dress silhouettes, researching photographers and emailing caterers. She didn't mind. It felt like something sacred, building this day with her sister. She remembered Kayla as a little girl, trailing behind her with chocolate-stained hands, asking questions about everything, trusting her completely. That little girl was still there, just dressed in a more sophisticated shell. Every time Kayla beamed while talking about floral arrangements or candlelight dinner receptions, Trina's heart ached a little. In the best way. She wanted this for her. Happiness, stability, magic. And if Trina had to glue the whole thing together behind the scenes, she would. That's what big sisters did. Their mother, Darlene, had been relatively quiet during the early days of planning, offering the occasional, "You sure you want a fall wedding?" or "Champagne is expensive, you know," but nothing more. Trina assumed she'd stay in the background. She couldn't have been more wrong. But at that moment, as Kayla sent her a blurry selfie of the ring, tears in her eyes, lips smudged with wine and laughter, none of that mattered. Trina saved the photo in a special album titled Kayla's Wedding. She didn't know it yet, but that folder would eventually become a quiet archive of heartache. For now, it was joy. Simple, glowing joy. Dinner at the Mercer house had always followed the same rhythm. Darlene at the head of the table, her voice guiding conversation like a conductor's baton. Charles, their father, quietly chewing and nodding. Kayla sparkling under the warm glow of her mother's attention. And Trina, smiling, smoothing, managing the undercurrents like a stagehand in the wings. That evening wasn't different. The engagement was 3 weeks old, and Darlene had invited everyone over for a casual family meal, which always meant place cards and cloth napkins and wine too expensive to actually enjoy. "So, Kayla," Darlene said as she served roasted duck with lemon glaze, "have you thought about venues? I was talking to Susan. She knows someone at the Belmont estate. Very exclusive." Kayla looked up from her plate, surprised. "Trina and I were actually thinking of the Birchwood Gardens. It's smaller, but the courtyard is beautiful." Darlene didn't even pause. "Too rustic. You'll regret the photos. The Belmont has columns. Elegance never ages." Charles cleared his throat softly, a sound that died almost instantly. Trina reached for her glass but said nothing. Kayla hesitated. "Well, we haven't booked anything yet." "Good," Darlene said, dabbing the corner of her mouth. "I'll make a few calls." Trina met Kayla's eyes across the table, raising an eyebrow in silent question. Kayla gave a tiny shrug, half defeated, half apologetic. It was always like this. Darlene had mastered the art of loving control. Her concern wore the costume of involvement. Her suggestions came threaded with consequences. She didn't scream, didn't slam doors, didn't demand. She simply made things happen and dared anyone to call it manipulation. Trina had learned young to avoid the waves by swimming ahead of them. She got good at anticipating needs, fixing things before they became problems. When Kayla lost her shoes on the way to a recital, Trina found them. When Dad forgot anniversaries, Trina made the dinner reservation. When Mom spiraled, Trina steadied the world. But Kayla had never needed to navigate. She was born to glide. Her laugh was musical, her mistakes charming. Darlene lit up around her in a way Trina had learned to stop expecting. Not that she was unloved, just less adored. When Kayla got accepted to that overpriced arts program, Darlene threw a garden party. When Trina got a promotion at the firm, she got a nice job text with a thumbs-up emoji. Still, it wasn't bitterness Trina felt that night. Not yet. Just the old ache of invisibility, a familiar note in the background music of their family life. As Kayla and Darlene debated centerpiece options, Trina excused herself to the kitchen. The lemon tart needed plating, and someone had to make sure dinner didn't burn while the future was being planned. Trina had always found comfort in structure. Lists, budgets, timelines. She loved the feeling of turning chaos into calm. Planning Kayla's wedding should have been a dream. And at first, it was. Every Saturday morning for weeks, the two of them would sit on Kayla's couch with almond lattes and open laptops, scrolling through florist portfolios, comparing chair rentals, laughing about over-the-top cake designs. Kayla would light up every time Trina came over with a new mock-up or quote. "I couldn't do this without you," she said once, mid-hug, her voice muffled against Trina's shoulder. Trina believed her. She handled things quietly, without needing recognition. Booked a photographer Kayla loved but couldn't afford, paid the deposit herself, designed and ordered custom welcome bags for guests, full of tiny, thoughtful touches. Kayla's favorite herbal tea, a map of the city sketched by a local artist, personalized thank you cards. But then, slowly, the balance began to tilt. It started with the invitations. Trina had researched and hired a calligrapher whose work was both delicate and affordable. Kayla had loved the samples. But a week later, Darlene emailed out a digital mock-up from someone else, flashier, twice the price. "I've already put down a deposit," she wrote. "You'll thank me later. These are far more modern." Kayla hadn't objected. Then came the color palette. Trina and Kayla had agreed on dusty rose, eucalyptus green, and soft gray, romantic and understated. But at a family brunch, Darlene arrived with fabric swatches in jewel tones and declared, "These are much more flattering for everyone. We'll go with these instead." That time, Kayla hesitated. "Mom, Trust me, sweetheart. Muted tones wash you out." Trina watched it happen in slow motion. Kayla folded like always. She didn't complain, not directly. Instead, Trina found herself staying up later, working longer, redoing plans that had been finalized weeks before. She kept telling herself it was temporary, that once the dust settled, she and Kayla would laugh about it over wine and photo albums. But the more Darlene inserted herself, the more Trina was edged out. Appointments she'd scheduled were rescheduled without notice. Vendors were swapped without explanation. Her name stopped appearing in email threads. Still, she showed up. Still, she paid invoices. Still, she smiled. But one night, alone at her kitchen table, surrounded by folders and color samples she'd fought for and lost, Trina stared down at the spreadsheet she'd built and felt something unfamiliar rise in her chest. Not resentment, not anger, something quieter, colder, a creeping suspicion that this wasn't just about flowers or fonts, that this had never been about helping Kayla plan her dream wedding, that someone else, someone always watching, had never intended for her to be part of the dream at all. The changes came quietly, like hairline cracks in glass, almost invisible, until the whole thing splintered. At first, Trina didn't think much of it. Kayla was busy, that was all. Work, wedding, life. Trina had been there once herself, juggling spreadsheets and expectations while people asked the same 5 questions about seating charts. It made sense. But then came the little things. Text messages that used to get an instant reply suddenly went unanswered for hours, then a day, then forgotten. Kayla's voice on the phone turned rushed, her laugh slightly forced. And when Trina brought up a wedding detail they had discussed, band playlists, signature cocktails, flower girls, Kayla's answers were vague. "Oh, I think we changed that," she'd say. Or, "Mom found someone else. I meant to tell you." The first time Trina saw Morgan in a planning photo, she paused mid-scroll. It was on Kayla's Instagram story. Kayla and their cousin, cheeks pressed together, holding cupcake samples with the caption, "Cake Tasting Day." Trina hadn't been invited. She stared at the image longer than she should have. Morgan, with her effortless charm and always-on energy, had never been more than a background figure at family events, part of the noise, not the melody. But there she was, now appearing in photos that Trina had assumed she'd be the one taking. It didn't stop at cupcakes. Morgan started showing up in vendor meetings, picking dresses, giving input. She wasn't officially part of the bridal party, but she might as well have been. "She just has more free time," Kayla had said lightly when Trina asked. "You've been so slammed at work." Trina nodded. She didn't say what she wanted to. That free time had never been the issue. She made time, always had. But the distance was growing, brick by silent brick. One evening, After a long day at the office, Trina curled up on the couch and opened the group chat labeled Kayla's Dream Day. It had once been filled with texts from her and Kayla, ideas, photos, inside jokes. Now it was quiet, archived, replaced, it seemed, by conversations happening somewhere she wasn't invited. She flipped through her calendar. The next planning meeting she'd been told about was 2 weeks ago. There hadn't been another since. Her chest tightened. Not from jealousy, not really. This wasn't about Morgan. It was about being erased. Bit by bit, memory by memory, like being cropped out of a photo after it was already framed. She typed a quick message. "Want to grab lunch this week? Just us?" Then hovered, thumb above send. She deleted it instead. If Kayla wanted her there, she'd ask. The silence that followed said everything. Trina found out about the dress fitting by accident. It was a Tuesday afternoon, halfway through a meeting at work, when her coworker Nadine leaned over and whispered, "Your sister looked gorgeous in that dress, by the way. Sandra texted me a pic. Kayla totally had that bridal glow." Trina blinked. "What dress?" Nadine paused. "Her appointment yesterday? Elegant Moments Bridal? Sandra said it was such a fun group. Your mom, Kayla, and I think your cousin was there?" The smile on Trina's face was instant, polite, automatic. She nodded like she knew, like she'd simply forgotten, but her fingers had already gone cold. She waited until the meeting ended, then ducked into the stairwell and sat on the third step, thumb hovering over her messages. There was nothing recent from Kayla, no updates, no invite, no explanation. She told herself maybe it was a misunderstanding, maybe it was a spontaneous visit, maybe it wasn't even the final appointment. But she knew better. They had talked about dress shopping since they were teenagers. Pillowcases as veils, bad TLC reruns playing in the background, pinky promises sealed with gummy bears. "When it's my turn, you'll be there," Kayla had always said. Front row, tissues in hand. And now it had happened without her. That night, Trina texted, "Hey, heard you went dress shopping? How'd it go?" The reply came 3 hours later. "Yeah, Mom had an appointment and dragged me in. Totally unplanned. Found something I liked, though. No apology, no mention of her absence. Just breezy dismissal." Trina stared at the screen. She could almost hear the shrug in Kayla's voice, like the whole thing was no big deal. But it was. It was a very big deal. She didn't bring it up again, but she started watching more closely. And that's when she saw the pattern. Bridal shower planning? Morgan was in every group photo. Bachelorette trip details? She found out after the Airbnb was already booked. Vendor calls, playlist drafts, centerpiece decisions, each one arrived with a past tense certainty, like she was reading headlines about an event she thought she'd be attending. One evening, she got a group email confirming a new caterer she hadn't even heard about. The subject line, "Final decision. Thanks for your help, everyone." Her name wasn't on the recipient list. Someone must have forwarded it by mistake. Trina stared at her screen, not angry, just tired. She thought of all the hours she'd spent compiling budget sheets, comparing venues, transferring deposits, all the quiet, behind-the-scenes work, all the time she'd assumed love and loyalty meant inclusion. Apparently she was mistaken. Apparently there was a list, and she wasn't on it anymore. It was late, nearly midnight, and Trina sat on the couch with her legs curled under her, laptop open but forgotten. The TV was on low, some cooking competition she wasn't watching. She kept scrolling through Kayla's Instagram stories, each image like a pinprick. Cupcake tastings, dress alterations, wine nights with Morgan. Tyler walked in with a glass of water, pausing when he saw her face. "You okay?" She clicked her phone off too quickly. "Yeah, just tired." He sat beside her, handing her the glass. "That the dress again?" Trina nodded, staring into the water like it might reflect something useful. "I didn't even know she'd picked one. I thought I'd at least get to help with that part." Tyler leaned back, arm draped behind her on the couch. "You're not just tired, Trin. You're off." "I'm not off," she said too quickly. Then softer. "I just didn't expect to feel so replaceable." They sat in silence for a beat, the distant clatter of the TV filling the space. "You think this is just wedding stress?" Tyler asked gently. "Because it doesn't feel like that anymore." She looked at him. He wasn't accusing, just watching, steady as always. "I don't know what it is," she admitted. "Kayla's just different. It's like I lost my place somewhere without realizing it. First Mom took over everything, then Morgan started showing up at appointments I didn't even know about, and Kayla, she doesn't even seem to notice I'm not there." "Or she's pretending not to," he said. Trina exhaled, slow and heavy. "You think that's worse?" "I think something's happening that you're not being told." He paused, careful with his words. "And I think your mom's at the center of it." Trina looked down at her hands. She'd thought the same thing more than once, but hearing it out loud made it feel more real, more dangerous. "She's always had her ways," Trina said. "But this feels different. It's not just that she wants control. It's like she's removing me." Tyler reached for her hand. "You've spent your whole life trying to keep the peace in that family, fixing things, smoothing over. Maybe this time you're not supposed to fix it." She blinked back something sharp behind her eyes. "Then what do I do?" "Start asking questions, and don't accept silence as an answer." Trina leaned into him, the weight of his arm around her a small relief in a day full of doubt. She didn't say anything more, but his words stuck. Maybe silence wasn't just forgetfulness. Maybe it was strategy. The invoice came on a Wednesday. Trina had been expecting it. She'd found the photographer herself, tracked down his portfolio after Kayla described wanting something dreamy but not too staged. He wasn't cheap, but his work was beautiful. Worth it. She opened the email and clicked Pay Now without thinking twice. Another $2,500 from her account, quietly making someone else's vision possible. She didn't tell anyone she'd covered it. Not Kayla, not their parents. That's how things worked in her family. Trina handled the details so others could enjoy the big picture. She liked it that way, usually. But lately, the joy had dulled. The gifts had started to pile up in the corner of her apartment. Personalized robes for the bridal party, calligraphy name cards, a hand-bound guest book she had commissioned from an artist overseas. She wrapped each item carefully, attaching handwritten notes Kayla would never know she wrote. She was still contributing, still supporting. But something had shifted. She wasn't being thanked anymore, or even asked. At the florist, the assistant had hesitated when Trina gave her name. "I thought Morgan was handling final arrangements," she asked, flipping through the clipboard. Trina offered a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm paying for them," she replied simply. The girl flushed and nodded. There was a growing emptiness to her involvement, like setting a table she wasn't invited to sit at. She told herself not to be petty, not to expect recognition. That wasn't why she did things. She gave because she loved Kayla, because she wanted this day to be perfect, because that's what big sisters did. But as the wedding got closer, the exclusion began to feel deliberate, calculated. Like a party happening in the next room, laughter filtering through the walls while she stayed behind to clean up. The only time she felt seen was when something needed to be paid for. At dinner with her parents, Darlene had mentioned casually that she'd upgraded the table linens to something a bit more refined. "We'll split it 3 ways," she added, like that had already been agreed upon. Trina didn't argue, just nodded and made a mental note to move some money around. Again. But later that night, as she sat in bed staring at the glow of her banking app, she felt a sting of something bitter. Not about the money, but what it had come to symbolize. Her place in this wedding was no longer about love or closeness. It was transactional, convenient. She was the reliable one, the invisible glue. And invisible, she was starting to realize, didn't feel noble anymore. It just felt lonely. Trina had been told it was just a quick meeting, nothing formal, just a chance to go over some final wedding details. Her mother's text had been vague, but Kayla had confirmed it, and so she went. No notebook, no agenda, just a quiet hope that maybe things were starting to circle back to normal. She brought lemon scones from the bakery Kayla loved and wore the earrings Kayla had given her 2 birthdays ago. She told herself it mattered, that her sister would notice. When she arrived at the house, the air felt wrong, too still. Kayla sat stiffly on the couch, hands folded in her lap. Darlene stood behind her like a shadow with lipstick, arms crossed, eyes bright with something unreadable. Morgan was there too, perched on the arm of the chair like she belonged. Trina paused in the doorway. "What's going on?" "We wanted to speak to you together," Darlene said. "About the wedding." Trina's stomach tightened. She looked to Kayla, but her sister wouldn't meet her eyes. Darlene didn't wait. "There's been a lot of tension lately. Confusion, miscommunication." "Mistrust," Morgan added softly, faux regret heavy in her tone. Trina's pulse began to climb. She looked back to Kayla. What is this?" Darlene stepped forward, voice calm, measured. "We've decided it's best if you step back from the wedding entirely." The words didn't land at first. They just hovered in the air, absurd and surreal. "I'm sorry?" "You're no longer the maid of honor," Darlene said smoothly. "And after everything that's happened, we feel it would be best if you didn't attend at all." Silence crashed through the room. Trina's breath caught in her throat. "You feel that?" she asked, voice barely steady. "Or Mom does." Kayla finally looked up. Her eyes were glassy, but her voice was quiet. "It's just, there's been so much stress, Trin, and every time you're involved, things get more tense." "Tense?" Trina laughed, a sharp, shocked sound. "I've paid for your photographer, your flowers, your favors, half the things you're using, but I'm the problem?" "You keep trying to take over," Morgan interjected. "You make Kayla feel like her choices aren't enough." "I've done nothing but support her," Trina snapped. "Even when I wasn't invited, even when I was erased from every part of this." Darlene's voice turned hard. "We're asking for peace, and peace at this point means distance." Trina stood frozen, heart pounding, fingers curled into fists at her sides. She looked at her sister one last time. "Kayla, is this really what you want?" Kayla hesitated, then nodded once. "It's for the best." Trina didn't say another word. She turned, walked out of the house, and didn't look back. It wasn't just a role they took from her, it was the illusion of family. The drive home blurred. She remembered backing out of the driveway, remembered the sun catching on her windshield, but not much else. It was like her body went on autopilot, while her mind hovered somewhere outside herself. Stuck in the moment, Kayla had nodded, just once, just enough, to let it all fall apart. Trina didn't cry right away. She sat in the driver's seat for a long time after pulling into her parking spot, fingers still clenched around the steering wheel, jaw aching from holding it too tight. It wasn't until she stepped into her apartment, still scattered with ribbons and welcome bag tags and the list of reception songs Kayla once told her made her feel like the bride version of herself, that the tears came. Not loud, not dramatic, just silent and steady, like something inside her had sprung a leak and didn't know how to stop. She sank to the floor in the kitchen, back against the cabinet, knees drawn up. The scones she'd brought to the meeting were still in her bag, slightly crushed. She stared at them for a while. They had told her she was too much, that her help felt like control, that her care felt like judgment. She replayed every interaction over the last 6 months, every email she'd sent, every suggestion she'd made. Had she pushed too hard? Taken up too much space? Had she been blind to how Kayla really felt all along? The self-doubt crept in, slow and patient. Maybe she had made things harder. Maybe her help had come with strings she didn't see herself holding. Maybe Kayla was right to cut her out. But even as those thoughts slithered in, another voice inside her whispered, "No, you were there. You showed up. You loved her." That voice was quieter. Tyler called, but she didn't answer. Not right away. Not that night. Instead, she wandered through her apartment like a ghost in someone else's life. She opened drawers filled with receipts and planning documents, playlists and bridal timelines. She didn't throw anything out, not yet. She just moved slower, quieter. The silence felt different now. It wasn't peace. It was exile. The worst part wasn't being cut out of the wedding. It was the realization that the people she loved most could so easily let her go. That love could be rewritten in a single conversation, and no one, not even the sister she raised and protected, stood up for her. The collapse wasn't loud. It didn't leave shattered glass or screaming matches in its wake. It just left her alone, surrounded by the ruins of a life she thought was safe. At dawn, the city still slept. The windows of Trina's apartment glowed with the soft gray of morning, everything quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional rush of a car below. She hadn't slept. Not really. Just drifted in and out of stillness, wrapped in the ache of disbelief. Her eyes were gritty, her heart sore, but her mind was sharp. She walked to the kitchen and opened her laptop. The screen lit up, cold and blue. She clicked through folders until she found it. Kayla plus Derek. Bali itinerary. Trina had spent months planning it. First-class flights, oceanfront villa, a sunset cruise with live violin, a handwritten itinerary tied with silk ribbon she never gave Kayla. She had imagined presenting it at the rehearsal dinner. Kayla's shock, her teary smile, the hug that said thank you and I'm sorry without needing words. That moment wouldn't come now. She opened the travel portal. Cancellations were permitted with minor fees. She clicked cancel reservation on the flights, then the villa, then the excursions. Each confirmation ping felt like pulling a thread from the edge of something she'd stitched together too carefully. The total refund flashed on the screen. $8,600 returned to her account. Trina stared at the number. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like breath. Like a single inhale after weeks underwater. She wasn't punishing Kayla. This wasn't a tantrum. It was the first act of choosing herself. Her phone buzzed on the counter, a text from her mother. "Call me. We need to discuss your behavior." She turned it face down. Next, she logged into her bank and began pulling her name from anything wedding-related. The florist? Paid in full. Photographer? Covered. Custom robes, favors, welcome bags, all accounted for. She made a list, not out of spite, but for clarity, for closure. Then she sent one final email to the travel concierge who helped arrange the honeymoon. "Plans have changed. Please cancel all services effective immediately. Thank you for your assistance and discretion." Trina closed her laptop, hands trembling only slightly now. The first light of morning crept across the hardwood floor. Something had shifted. It wasn't anger. Not anymore. It was resolve. They had drawn the line, decided she was too much, too controlling, too complicated to be part of their perfect day. Fine. But she had her own line now, and she wouldn't step back over it just to be tolerated. She'd spent too long proving her worth in silence. This time, she would let her absence speak. Trina hadn't told many people what happened. A vague, wedding stuff got messy, was usually enough to shut down questions without opening wounds. But the story had begun to ripple beyond her control, moving in circles she hadn't touched. It was Olivia, her oldest friend, who cracked the silence. They were at their usual Saturday cafe, the one with mismatched mugs and too loud jazz. Trina stirred her coffee slowly, barely listening, until Olivia leaned forward and said, "Can I ask you something weird?" Trina looked up. "Always. Has your mom been saying things about you to other people?" Trina blinked. "What kind of things?" Olivia hesitated. "She told my mom that you'd been having a hard time emotionally, that the family was concerned." That you'd been acting unstable since Kayla got engaged. The words landed like a slap. She said what? Trina asked, her voice flat. I didn't want to believe it, Olivia said quickly. But it wasn't just once. It came up again at the Hendersons' dinner last month. Someone mentioned the wedding, and your mom said you'd taken a step back to protect your mental health. That you'd become obsessive. Trina stared down at her cup, the liquid trembling faintly in her hand. And she made it sound believable, Olivia added gently. Not dramatic, just worried, like a mother trying to help a struggling daughter. Trina didn't speak. Because suddenly, other moments came rushing in. Her aunt's distant tone on the phone last week. The coworker who said, "You must be relieved not to have all that wedding stress anymore." The sidelong glances at family brunch. Her mother had been laying the groundwork for months, painting her as fragile, controlling, jealous, preparing everyone for the day she would cut Trina out, so when it happened, no one would question it. Olivia reached across the table. I shut it down every time I heard it, Trina, but I think she's told a lot of people, quietly, like she's helping. Trina swallowed hard. She's not helping. I know. The betrayal sat differently than the one from Kayla. It wasn't a wound. It was corrosion. Silent. Systematic. Her mother hadn't just pushed her out of the wedding. She'd rewritten the story to make it look like Trina walked out on her own. That night, Trina sat in bed with her phone, scrolling through old texts, looking for signs she'd missed, truths twisted just enough to feel like misunderstandings. But now, it was unmistakable. Her mother had been erasing her in plain sight. And the world had already begun to believe it. The office was warm, softly lit, with a gentle hum of white noise in the background. The couch was deep and unfamiliar, and Trina sat on the edge of it, her hands twisted in her lap like she was bracing for impact. She wasn't sure what she expected when she walked into Dr. Harris's office. Some sterile checklist, maybe, or sympathetic nodding and a suggestion to let it go. What she didn't expect was quiet recognition, a calm, steady presence that didn't ask her to explain everything at once. It's not about the wedding, Dr. Harris said during their second session, after listening to Trina's halting account of everything that had happened. Being cut out, the lies, the silence, the sudden rewriting of who she was. It feels like it is, Trina replied, half laughing, half drowning. It feels like everything shattered around that one day. It shattered there, Dr. Harris said gently. But the cracks were already there. The roles were already in place. Trina blinked. Roles? Dr. Harris nodded. In families with narcissistic patterns, members often get assigned roles. The golden child, the one who can do no wrong. The scapegoat, the one who's blamed, no matter what they do. The enabler, the one who keeps the peace, smooths things over, protects the image. Trina sat still. Slowly, something inside her started to click into place. You've always been the fixer, Dr. Harris continued, the one who holds the weight for everyone. But in systems like this, when you stop playing that role, or even just question it, you become dangerous to the narrative. Trina looked down at her hands. Kayla's the golden child. The words came out quiet. She always has been. Even when we were kids, Mom lit up around her in a way she never did with me. And you? Dr. Harris asked. I think I was both, Trina said slowly. The fixer, until I stopped. Now I'm the problem. There was silence then, not empty but full, like a breath being held between truths. It wasn't instant relief. There was no grand unraveling, but there was recognition, and with it, a kind of soft grief. Because Trina began to see it clearly now. The patterns, the quiet manipulations, the way her mother's love had always come with conditions, the way she had been trained to measure her worth in usefulness. She walked out of that appointment into a gray afternoon, the air heavy with spring rain. But she felt lighter somehow. Not fixed, not healed, but awake. She wasn't crazy. She wasn't overreacting. She was stepping out of a role she had never asked to play. And even though it terrified her, it also felt, for the first time in a long time, like the start of becoming herself. The message came late on a Sunday night, long after Trina had silenced her phone and curled into bed. When she checked it in the morning, blinking through sleep, the name on the screen stopped her cold. Aunt Marianne. She hadn't seen her in years, maybe not since Kayla's high school graduation. The sister their mother never talked about, not without a sharp edge in her voice. She was always dramatic, Darlene used to say, waving off questions with a tight smile. Always had a flair for chaos. But the message was short, and it hummed with quiet urgency. Trina, I heard what happened. Can we talk? Please. They met that afternoon at a park halfway between their cities. Trina didn't know what to expect. She hadn't even known if Marianne would recognize her. But as soon as she saw her sitting on a bench, scarf wrapped tight around her neck despite the warming weather, there was no mistaking the blood they shared. Marianne stood and pulled Trina into a hug that was firm, but not forced. You look like your father, she said. Then, after a pause, that's a compliment. They sat. The silence stretched a moment too long before Marianne said, She did it to me, too. Trina didn't ask who. She didn't need to. Marianne's eyes stayed on the pond in front of them, where a few ducks floated through the murky water. When I got engaged years ago, I asked Darlene to be part of the wedding. Just a small role, read something at the ceremony. She told me I was selfish, that I was trying to show her up, that I didn't value family enough to let her plan everything. Trina's breath caught. I thought if I compromised, things would get better, Marianne continued. So I let her choose the flowers, then the venue, then the guest list. By the time the wedding came, I didn't even recognize it. She'd made me so uncertain, so guilty, I ended up eloping 3 days before. Her voice broke, just slightly. She told everyone I'd lost my mind. I didn't speak to my brother, your dad, for almost 10 years. Trina stared, stunned. Why didn't anyone tell me? Marianne turned to her then. Because your mother tells her stories before you can tell yours. She builds the version people remember. Trina looked down at her hands, the ache in her chest growing familiar again. I thought I was the first. You're just the first who's strong enough to say it out loud. For the first time in weeks, Trina felt less alone. The pain didn't shrink, but it changed, became something she could hold without letting it bury her. You don't have to repeat the pattern, Marianne said gently, placing a hand over hers. But you do have to name it. Otherwise, it keeps writing itself. And for the first time, Trina understood. This wasn't just her story. It was an inheritance. And it was hers to break. Trina had been up since 5, not by choice. Sleep had never really come. She lay in bed with her eyes open, the pale light of morning brushing the walls in slow gray strokes. Her dress hung on the closet door, still zipped in its garment bag, untouched. She wasn't sure if she was going. Technically, she hadn't been invited. Not officially. No revised email, no last-minute olive branch. Just silence, cool and complete. Even Tyler had stopped asking if she was going to show up. He knew better now. She made tea just to have something to hold, something warm against the chill that lived in her chest. She stared at the steam rising, trying to feel anything but the ache that had settled deep in her ribs. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen without thinking, and froze. It was from Kayla. Just one line, "Tell her the truth or I will." Trina's breath caught. Her fingers tightened around the mug and hot tea sloshed over the rim onto her wrist. She didn't flinch. She read it again. "Tell her the truth or I will." She stared at the words as if they might rearrange themselves, offer context, soften their edge. but they stayed exactly as they were, sharp, direct, urgent. She hadn't heard from Kayla in nearly 3 weeks, not since that awful meeting in their parents' living room, where Kayla had looked everywhere but at her as Darlene laid down her verdict like law. Since then, only silence, and now this. Trina's mind raced. Was it a threat, a warning, a plea? Who was her? Their mother? And what truth? Trina had been swimming in half-truths and twisted stories for months now. There were so many things left unsaid, so many conversations that had been warped by someone else's hands. Was Kayla finally seeing it? She typed out a reply. Deleted it. Tried again. What are you talking about? What truth? 3 dots appeared. Blinked. Disappeared. Nothing. The silence after was louder than anything. Trina sat down at the kitchen table, phone still in her hand, heart thudding against her ribs like it wanted out. Her mind spun in spirals, every possible meaning stacking on top of the next. Was it about the dress fitting? The fake messages? The whispers that had been circling their family for weeks? Or had something else broken open? Something Kayla hadn't even known was there until it was too late? Trina didn't know. All she knew was that the message didn't feel like anger. It felt like desperation. And suddenly the wedding wasn't just a wound anymore. It was a trigger. Something was about to unravel. And whatever Kayla had seen, whatever she now knew, Trina could feel it. The truth was coming, whether she was ready or not. Trina didn't expect the knock. It was early, too early for visitors, and she was still in her robe, hair half-dried, mind still spinning from Kayla's message. When she opened the door, James stood there. Kayla's fiancé, suit jacket in hand, tie undone, eyes tight with something that looked too serious for a man about to get married in a few hours. "Can I come in?" he asked. She stepped aside, heart thudding in her chest. "Is Kayla okay?" "She's shaken." He hesitated, then added, "We both are." Trina closed the door behind him, dread rising like a tide. James didn't sit. He pulled out his phone and opened a screen, handing it to her without a word. It was a message thread. Between Kayla and her. Or someone pretending to be her. Trina read the first one. "Honestly, I think the wedding's over the top. I don't have time to babysit someone's Pinterest board." Then another. "If Morgan wants to help, let her. I'm too busy to hold Kayla's hand through every meltdown." The words made her stomach turn. The tone was off, cold, flippant, nothing like her. But there was her name. Her profile photo. A full conversation Kayla thought she was having with her. "I never wrote these," Trina said quietly, almost to herself. James nodded. "We figured." He scrolled down, showing her another thread. Her messages to Kayla from weeks earlier, photos of cake designs, venue questions. None of them had been opened. Some weren't even marked delivered. "Kayla was confused this morning," James said. "Your text about the truth. She thought you were threatening her. Then she remembered some of these old conversations and something just didn't sit right." He paused. "So we started comparing phones." Trina felt her pulse in her ears. "I'm guessing your mom had access to Kayla's phone at some point. Maybe when she helped her set up the wedding app or added vendors. But she changed contact info, swapped numbers, made it look like you were ignoring her, belittling her, backing out." Trina sat down slowly. And Kayla believed it. "She didn't want to," James said gently, "but your mom's convincing. And Kayla didn't know what else to believe." A sour ache bloomed in Trina's throat. Months of silence, confusion, distance, manufactured, constructed like a trap she never saw coming. James looked at her, earnest. "Kayla's not okay. She's furious. At your mom, at herself. She's trying to figure out how to fix this." Trina stared down at the phone in her hand, at the fake words someone had put there in her name. All this time she'd thought her silence had ruined things. But it wasn't her silence. It was her mother's voice, wearing her face. And now the damage wasn't just emotional. It was digital, documented, deliberate. Trina didn't know what she expected when she knocked on the hotel suite door, but it wasn't Kayla answering in pajama shorts and mascara-streaked eyes. Her sister looked like she hadn't slept, like she'd run headfirst through a storm, and maybe she had. "Hey," Kayla said, voice small. Trina nodded. "Hey." She stepped inside. Derek, tall, quiet, the kind of man who usually filled a room gently, was sitting on the couch, his laptop open, documents spread across the coffee table like evidence at a trial. He looked up and gave Trina a small nod, not pitying, just steady. Kayla closed the door. "Thank you for coming." "I wasn't sure I should," Trina said honestly. "I know." They sat, not quite across from each other, not quite beside each other either. There was space between them that hadn't been there before. Years of closeness now cracked and uncertain. "I didn't want to believe it," Kayla said, voice trembling. "Even after the texts, even after James showed me. I kept thinking, maybe there's another explanation." "There isn't," Trina said softly. Kayla looked down at her hands. "She told me you were overwhelmed, that you were pulling away because I was being selfish, that you couldn't say no to things, so you were lashing out instead." Trina's stomach twisted. "She told me you didn't want me involved, that you were happy with Morgan, that I was making everything harder." "I wasn't," Kayla whispered. "I never wanted to replace you." "But you did." The words came out sharper than Trina intended. Kayla flinched. Trina looked away. She didn't want to be cruel. She just didn't know how to hold the truth without it hurting. Derek leaned forward, folding a sheet of paper in half. "Your mom didn't just send fake messages. She deleted real ones. From both of you. Kayla thought you stopped responding. You thought Kayla had." "I kept waiting for you to ask me," Trina said. "About the dress fitting, about the invitations, anything, but you didn't." "I thought you didn't care anymore," Kayla said, her voice cracking. "I thought you were done with me." They both fell quiet. It wasn't just the lies. It was how easily they'd both accepted them. Trust wasn't just broken. It had been worn down, piece by piece, by a third hand neither of them had questioned soon enough. Trina finally looked up. "What now?" "I don't know," Kayla said. "I'm so sorry, Trin. I don't even know how to begin to fix this." Trina nodded, the ache in her chest still present, but not consuming. "You start by not pretending it didn't happen." The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was honest. Maybe that was a beginning. Darlene answered the door with a practiced smile, her lipstick perfect, her cardigan draped just so. She looked like any mother preparing for a wedding, composed and efficient, as if the last 24 hours hadn't cracked the ground beneath them. "Trina," she said, stepping aside, "you're here early. We've got a lot to do today." Trina stepped inside without responding, her shoulders squared, a folder tucked under her arm. She didn't remove her coat. She didn't sit. Darlene turned, heading for the kitchen. "Do you want coffee? I just made a fresh pot. Kayla's going to need you calm today, not dramatic." Trina followed her to the counter and placed the folder down. She opened it slowly, deliberately, revealing printouts of text conversations, real and fake, flight itineraries, canceled reservations, email logs, a neatly arranged, undeniable trail. Darlene glanced at it, then looked back at Trina, the smile slipping just a fraction. "This is everything you've tampered with," Trina said. Her voice didn't shake. "Every text you faked, every time you deleted something or rewrote something to make me look unstable or cruel." Darlene's face remained still, but her hands gripped the edge of the counter. "I spoke with James, with Kayla. They know," Trina continued. "But they haven't heard it from you yet. They haven't seen this." She tapped the folder. "I was trying to protect her," Darlene said too quickly. She was overwhelmed. You were suffocating her. No, Trina said. You were manipulating her, just like you've done to everyone for years. But this time you got caught. Darlene's lips parted, a protest forming, but Trina cut her off. You have a choice, she said. Tell Kayla the truth, all of it, everything you did, or I will, and I'll do it with receipts. Darlene's jaw tensed. You'd humiliate your mother? On her sister's wedding day? I'd rather tell the truth than watch you destroy her from the inside out, Trina replied. And if you're worried about humiliation, maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to impersonate your own daughter. Silence stretched between them. Darlene looked at the folder again, then at Trina. For the first time, there was something like uncertainty behind her eyes. Not guilt. Trina wasn't naive enough to expect that. But the first flicker of fear, exposure. This isn't just about me anymore, Trina said, her voice softer now. It's about Kayla. She deserves a wedding free of lies, and a future not built on your version of reality. She turned to leave, the heaviness in her chest replaced by something steadier, not peace exactly, but power. As she reached the door, Darlene's voice came, low and tight. You'll regret this, Trina. Trina paused, glanced back. No, she said. I regret not doing it sooner. The living room felt colder than usual, even with the late spring sun pouring through the windows. Darlene sat on the edge of the armchair like it was a throne, legs crossed, her hands resting lightly on her knee. Kayla sat stiffly beside Derek on the couch, her expression unreadable. James leaned against the far wall, arms folded, jaw tight. Trina stood near the fireplace, the folder once again in her hands, edges worn now from use. Her father, Charles, hovered by the doorway, as if unsure whether he was part of the room or a witness to it. We're not going to waste time, Trina said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. There's too much to cover, and no one here needs more small talk. Darlene gave a tight smile. I agree. I'm tired of the dramatics. Trina opened the folder and pulled out the printouts, holding them out toward Kayla. These are the real messages, my actual texts. The ones you never saw, because Mom intercepted and replaced them. Kayla took them, hands trembling. She began to flip through slowly, her eyes scanning, her mouth drawn in a hard line. Derek leaned in beside her, reading too. Some of them, Trina continued, are screenshots of fake texts. Mom created entire conversations where I was made to sound jealous, bitter, unkind. And Kayla believed them, because why wouldn't she? They looked real. I didn't want to, Kayla whispered, but they felt possible. Darlene's eyes narrowed. I was trying to keep the peace. You two were already at each other's throats. No, Trina said, her voice sharper now. We weren't. Not until you started whispering lies into every crack you could find. You always think you're above everyone, Darlene snapped. Always needing to be the hero, the savior. It's exhausting. Charles spoke for the first time. Darlene. She turned toward him, startled. He cleared his throat. I saw some of the messages, too. The ones Trina printed, and the ones she never sent. I compared them to Kayla's phone. They don't match. Darlene's face tightened. Did you do this? Charles asked, and the room went still. Her mother didn't answer right away. The pause dragged just long enough to be confirmation. I did what I had to, she finally said, voice clipped. Kayla was drowning, and Trina was making everything harder. She always does. No, Kayla said, the word coming out like a breath she'd been holding for months. You made it harder. You twisted everything. You made me doubt the one person who's always shown up for me. Darlene's eyes flashed, but Kayla didn't look away. This ends now, Kayla said. The lies, the control, all of it. For the first time, Darlene looked small in the room she usually ruled, and for the first time, Trina didn't feel like the problem. She felt like the truth. His silence after Kayla's words hung in the air like smoke, bitter, lingering. Darlene stood slowly, her hands clenched into fists so tight her knuckles turned white. Her gaze swept the room like a threat, pausing just long enough on each of them to leave something unsaid. "You're all ungrateful," she hissed. "Everything I've done has been for this family, for you, Kayla, and this is how I'm repaid?" No one answered. "I gave you everything," she continued, her voice rising, cracking. "I protected you from people like her," she spat, nodding toward Trina. "Always needing attention, always the martyr, and now you want to pretend I'm the villain?" "No," Kayla said softly. "I'm not pretending anymore." Darlene's breath caught in her throat, a small gasp of disbelief. And then, without another word, she turned and grabbed her purse off the side table. Her heels clacked like gunshots across the hardwood as she stormed to the front door. Just before stepping out, she turned. "You'll regret this," she said, her voice cold and final. "You'll see who really holds this family together." The door slammed behind her, rattling in the frame. For a moment, no one moved. Trina sat down slowly, the adrenaline draining from her limbs. Her hands were still shaking, but the heat that had lived in her chest for months, the constant buzz of injustice and grief, had quieted. Not disappeared, but settled. Then Charles spoke. "I should have said something sooner." Kayla turned to him, eyes wide. "Dad?" He nodded, rubbing his hands together like he was trying to warm them. "I knew something was off. I didn't know the extent, but I saw the way your mother talked about Trina. The way she framed things. I just—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "You looked the other way," Trina said. "Not cruelly, just true." He met her gaze. "I did. I told myself I was keeping the peace, but all I was doing was enabling her. I let it happen because silence was easier." A long pause followed, full of everything unsaid between them. "I'm sorry," he added, voice low. "To both of you." Kayla sat back, her hands folded in her lap, eyes distant. "I feel like I don't know who raised me." "You do," Trina said quietly. "You just didn't know the whole story." Kayla blinked, a tear slipping down her cheek. "What do I do now? The wedding's in less than a day, and everything feels like it's burning." Trina reached over, squeezing her hand. "You start where we always should have, with the truth. Everything else can be rebuilt." Outside, the wind picked up. Somewhere down the street, a door slammed. Inside, the sisters sat together in the wreckage, not lost, not whole, but facing the light. They met at the cafe they used to love, the one with chipped mugs and too many ferns, where they'd once spent lazy Sunday mornings planning birthday parties and exchanging half-baked ideas about dream vacations they never took. Trina got there first and chose their usual table by the window, though it suddenly felt unfamiliar. When Kayla arrived, her face looked thinner than Trina remembered, not physically, but emotionally, like something in her had been worn down. She sat without a word, wrapping both hands around her coffee cup as if she needed something to hold her together. "Hi," Trina said gently. Kayla nodded. "Hi." A long pause stretched between them. Not hostile, just full, like both were sifting through what could be said, what should be said, and what might break them all over again. "I've been thinking," Kayla started, her voice barely above the clink of ceramic, "about how easily I let her twist you, twist us." Trina looked down at her cup. "You didn't let her. She's been shaping the story for years." "I believed it," Kayla said. "That you were controlling. That you were pulling away because you didn't trust me to make my own decisions." "I wasn't pulling away," Trina said, her voice quieter now. "I was being pushed." Kayla's eyes filled, but she didn't blink the tears away. "I should have asked." I should have come to you directly. I should have fought harder, Trina said. Or maybe just earlier. They sat in the honesty of it, in the ache of mutual failure, without trying to clean it up. I think I needed you to be perfect, Kayla whispered, so I could keep being the one everyone loved. You were the responsible one, the strong one, but I needed you to be wrong sometimes, to justify all the ways I depended on you. Trina exhaled. The confession didn't sting the way it might have a week ago. It just landed. Human, real. I needed you to need me, she said. It made me feel useful. Needed. Like I belonged. Kayla gave a soft, broken laugh. We've been loving each other through conditions. And trying to survive Mom at the same time. Silence again, but now there was warmth under it. A loosening. Kayla reached across the table, her hand finding Trina's. I want to build this back, not just because of the wedding, but because I miss my sister. Trina's throat tightened. I miss you too. They didn't make promises, they didn't pretend everything was fixed, but they stayed at that cafe for hours, talking about nothing and everything, laughing where they could, crying when they needed to. It wasn't the same as before, but it was honest. And maybe that was better. The air in Kayla's apartment felt different now, less like a holding space for chaos, and more like somewhere someone actually lived. The planning boards were gone, the scattered swatches and flower samples replaced with quiet. There was still tension, still fallout hanging in the corners like dust that hadn't settled, but something else had taken root too. Clarity. Trina sat on the edge of the couch, watching Kayla pace the room barefoot, hair up, phone silenced on the counter. I keep going back and forth, Kayla said. 1 minute I'm ready to call it all off and fly to Vegas. The next, I want the whole thing exactly as we planned it before everything imploded, like nothing happened. But something did happen, Trina said gently. I know. Kayla stopped pacing. She turned, arms folded, not defensive, protective. That's the thing. I don't want to pretend it didn't. I want the wedding, but on my terms this time. Not Mom's, not Morgan's, not a version of me they imagined. Trina nodded. That sounds like the right kind of hard. I'm asking people to step back, Kayla said. Even Derek's family. Anyone who tries to push or control or advise without being asked. She met Trina's eyes. That includes you. Trina didn't flinch. Good. I want the same. They both smiled. Wary, real. I want you there, Kayla added. Officially, as my maid of honor, if you'll still do it. There was a pause, not from hesitation, but from weight. Trina felt it settle in her chest, that quiet ache of hope trying to grow again. I will, she said. But I'm not fixing things this time. I'm not pouring myself into every crack just to hold it together. Kayla nodded. I wouldn't ask you to. I want you beside me, not underneath all of it. That was the shift. The difference between being useful and being loved, between being needed and being chosen. And Mom? Trina asked. Kayla's face tightened. She can come, but she's not in control. If she tries to override one more decision, she's out. I don't care how many checks she's written. She'll push back. I know. That's why I have boundaries now. Kayla exhaled. She can't rebuild the version of this family that works best for her. Not anymore. Trina leaned back on the couch. For the first time in a long while, her chest didn't feel like it was holding back a flood. There were still cracks, still grief. But there was space, too. Space for something better. We're going to be okay, Kayla said softly. Not perfect, Trina added. Kayla smiled. No, but real. And real, they both realized, was what they'd needed all along. The morning light filtered through gauzy curtains, soft and golden, the kind of light that made everything feel like it belonged in a dream. Kayla sat in front of the mirror, her hands steady, lips parted slightly as Trina adjusted the veil. They didn't say much. Words felt unnecessary now, and maybe too fragile. The room was quiet except for the soft rustle of satin and the occasional click of a curling iron. "You look like yourself," Trina said, stepping back to take in the full picture. "Not a magazine bride. You..." Kayla met her eyes in the mirror and smiled. "That's what I wanted." Downstairs, the guests were beginning to arrive. Someone was playing soft strings in the courtyard. Trina recognized the quartet she'd found months ago, the one her mother tried to replace. And for once, no one had. The venue sparkled with simplicity: eucalyptus garlands, candles in glass votives, tables that hadn't been obsessively rearranged for appearances. Kayla had made choices that reflected her, not expectations. And Trina had helped, not by running things, but by standing beside her. The ceremony began at 4. The air was warm but not heavy, the kind of late spring day that held no threat of storms. Trina stood to Kayla's left, bouquet in hand, heart thudding not from fear, but from something steadier. Presence. Darlene sat in the front row, poised and polished in champagne silk. Her smile never quite reached her eyes. She clapped politely, nodded when appropriate, but made no speeches, offered no interruptions. She hadn't spoken directly to Trina all day, not since the meeting, not since everything had been dragged, trembling, into the light. But Trina didn't need her words. Her silence was enough. A performance for the guests, a performance no one believed anymore. During the vows, Kayla's voice shook, just slightly, when she promised to choose truth over comfort. Derek reached for her hand mid-sentence, and the moment hung there like something sacred. Trina watched it unfold, feeling more than just a sister's pride. She felt peace, sharp-edged, but genuine. This day could have belonged to someone else, a version of Kayla molded by Darlene's expectations, standing beside someone who looked like her but wasn't. But it didn't. It belonged to them, the ones who'd chosen the harder path, the messier love, the real thing. After the ceremony, as guests filed into the reception hall, Darlene brushed past Trina, pausing just long enough to murmur, "Enjoy it while it lasts." Trina didn't flinch. She turned, calm and deliberate. "I intend to." She rejoined Kayla near the head table, laughter already returning to her voice, the kind that vibrated from the inside out. This wasn't a fairy tale, it was better, because it was real. The reception was in full swing when Trina slipped away from the crowd, weaving through the hum of laughter and clinking glasses toward the gift table near the back of the hall. The room pulsed with warmth, soft lights strung like stars, jazz weaving through conversations. For the first time in months, she felt light. Not weightless, but untethered from the pressure that used to live in her shoulders. She returned with a small white box in her hands, wrapped with twine, and a single pressed flower on top. Nothing flashy, nothing performative, just quiet, and hers. Kayla and Derek were at their table, cheeks flushed from dancing, hands still clasped under the tablecloth. When Trina approached, Kayla's eyes lit up in that instinctive way they always had, like muscle memory. "I thought we agreed, no more surprises," Kayla said, teasing. "I lied," Trina said, and smiled. "One last one." She set the box in front of them. Derek raised an eyebrow, and Kayla tilted her head. Trina leaned forward slightly, her voice low, just for them. "This isn't the Bali trip. It's not a grand gesture. It's not a rescue." Kayla grew quiet, her fingers brushing the edge of the box. "I wanted to give you something that felt like a beginning," Trina continued. "Not a peace offering, not a repayment, just something real." Kayla opened the box slowly. Inside was a small, leather-bound notebook, hand-stitched, the initials K and D pressed into the cover. Beneath it, 2 envelopes, one labeled "Open on a bad day," the other, "Open on a beautiful one." Derek reached for Kayla's hand as she turned over the notebook. Inside the front cover, Trina had written, "For the days ahead, the ones that are messy, honest, imperfect, and yours." Kayla blinked rapidly, her thumb resting on the ink as if she could feel the intention in it. Trina continued, her voice soft. "Inside are little prompts, reflections, stuff I've collected from my own therapy, from books, from life, questions you can ask each other, things to say when you don't know how to start saying anything." Derek opened one of the envelopes, peeking inside. A folded note in Trina's handwriting read, "List 5 things you love about each other that have nothing to do with appearance or accomplishments. Say them out loud." Kayla looked up, eyes brimming. "Trina, this is—" "You don't have to say anything," Trina said quickly. "Just take it with you. Use it or don't. It's yours. No expectations." Kayla didn't speak right away. She just stood, pulled Trina into a hug that was all arms and breath, and years of being sisters beneath the damage. And for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like they were holding each other together. It felt like they were just holding each other. That was the gift. No strings, just love. The house was quiet except for the soft hum of the dishwasher and the occasional clink of wind chimes on the balcony. Trina curled her fingers around a mug of chamomile tea, the kind Kayla used to tease her about. She smiled faintly at the memory. Some things returned, slowly, without fanfare, like the warmth between them. Not everything had healed, but the fractures no longer defined them. It had been nearly 5 months since the wedding. Kayla and Derek were settling into married life in their new apartment downtown, sending goofy selfies and asking for advice about things like slow cookers and tax deductions. They'd use the notebook. Not every day, but on the days that mattered. Kayla had texted her once after a rough patch with Derek, just a single line, "Your envelope saved us last night." Trina didn't respond with words. She just sent back a heart. It was enough. Darlene, on the other hand, had gone quiet. After the intervention, after the wedding where she played her part like a well-rehearsed actress, she slowly slipped back into the periphery. There were still messages, sometimes, carefully phrased texts that walked the line between guilt and defensiveness. Trina responded when she felt grounded enough. Sometimes she didn't. She no longer felt responsible for smoothing over the cracks her mother had created. Her dad called more often now. Short conversations, mostly, but more real than they'd been in years. He apologized again last week, unprompted, while trimming his bonsai trees. "I think I spent half my life trying to keep everyone calm," he'd said, and the other half realizing calm wasn't the same as love. Trina had let that one sit for a long time before answering. "But you're here now." That seemed to be enough for him. Tyler was still beside her, quietly constant. He never said "I told you so," even though he probably could have. He held her hand during the hardest therapy sessions and made her laugh on the days when she couldn't find her own voice. When she talked about trust now, she used his name. And Trina herself, well, she had changed too. She no longer gave to be chosen, no longer contorted herself to be digestible or dutiful. She chose herself now, in big ways and small. The door buzzed. She padded across the apartment in slippers, opening it to find Kayla, windswept and glowing, holding 2 takeout bags. "I brought your weird Thai tofu," she said. Trina grinned. "And I still say you'd like it if you'd just try it." Kayla laughed and stepped inside. Some ties break under pressure. Others survive the fire and come out gold-lined. This one did, and this time it wasn't built on roles or obligation. It was built on truth.